cases and actions, both nationally. We don't really have a good track record to build on in California yet. Do you find historically increased registration of those same protected minorities? And if so, do those protected minorities that have now registered, do they actually vote?
Absolutely, and Darren mentioned Compton. I think that's a perfect example. And actually, I think we do have a decent track record in California as well. Compton is an excellent example. Compton is about 2/3 Hispanic by population, 1/3 African American. I think there might be even 1 or 2 white guys that live there too.
They're very tan.
They probably speak Spanish. And however, because the Latino community is generally a younger population, and also there's a larger percentage of non-citizens, in other words, not eligible to vote, the eligible voters Latino is about 45%. They had at-large elections. The city of Compton had an all-African-American council. They had some great mayors like Omar Bradley, who actually ran again this time, lost. But they had never had a Latino representative on their city council. There was the most recent election just a few months ago was districted, and for the first time a Latino candidate was selected. Now, I don't know for certain that Latino candidate was the candidate preferred by Latinos, but I'd say it's a pretty good guess. And we've seen that in other districts as well.
You said, one of the knocks on the California Voting Rights Act I've heard is that it's vague. And one thing you said, we're an uncharted territory, which supports that it's vague, in that it wasn't, that there isn't a clear answer. And we have a law where a prevailing plaintiff's attorney gets reimbursed for attorney fees. A prevailing defense attorney does not, yet we have a law that you said, well, we're in uncharted territory. So a big knock is that it's vague.
So, with respect to it being vague,
it's not on.
It's not vague to me. It wasn't vague to Judge Mooney. Hasn't been vague to any of the other jurists that have decided the issues in those cases. When I was speaking of we're in uncharted territory, what I meant is that we're in uncharted territory because no other jurisdiction has been so dumb as Palmdale. No other jurisdiction has the cojones to say, we're going to ignore the rule of law, we're going to ignore the courts. That's where we're in uncharted territory.
To simplify what he's saying is, all the other decisions have settled before the judge actually had to make a ruling on what the resolve is. Palmdale is trying to push it to where the judge makes a resolve, as opposed to offering this back to the people. They did 10 years ago when the population was much different. 10 years ago, it was brought up to the community whether or not they wanted to be at larger districts, and at large won by a very slim margin. Now, 10 years later, where the population has changed even more, Palmdale is not willing, or the leadership of Palmdale, I'm not saying the citizens, because the citizens are, but the present leadership of Palmdale is not willing to put this back on the ballot for the people to go ahead and speak and say, yes, we want to empower our communities and move forward in a different direction.
So I also want to address the comments about attorney's fees. Because, I've been called an ambulance chaser. I don't do personal injury work, but...
No, so I just stated a fact.
You did
say
that. You did.
I they're saying that.
You didn't call me that. I'm just saying others have. And, it started as these cases are frivolous, okay? And then the judge came out in the Palmdale case and said plaintiffs win. Well, now my cases can't be frivolous, and the critics can't attack it on the substance, can't attack it on the law. They have to attack me personally. I could be doing a lot of different cases, and I could probably be making a lot more money. I have not made a single penny on any of these cases up to this point. And if you don't like me getting paid, I would encourage you to tell the Santa Clarita City Council, the Board of Trustees of the College of the Canyons, and your opponents in election in the Sulphur Springs School Board to stop paying me money. Because the longer they fight, the more I get paid. So I would encourage them to not pay me anymore. I don't want to get paid anymore. I would much prefer if citizens in Santa Clarita had a voice in their government. And that's why I'm doing this case.
And let's correct something for the record. Kevin and his law firm did not go searching out cities. I can tell you specifically, after being a Democratic leader, having his position for many years, being the regional director, recruiting candidates for decades. I've been there for 30 years, for 2 decades, recruited, trained candidates, ran campaigns. It was I. If you want to point the finger at anyone, it was me that called on people to look for attorneys to move this forward because we were having zero success in getting true representation of the communities of Palmdale on that city council. So if you want to blame anyone being the ambulance chaser, it would be me.
And parallel, I was doing the same thing.
I found Kevin. I asked Kevin to look at our numbers as I had seen firsthand, and it happened to be his law firm that took on the case, and I applaud him for that. But it was not him coming to seek out the public looking for money at all. It was the public looking for another remedy after banging our head against the wall, trying to make sure that every community, communities that look like me, communities that look like him, communities that look like her, wanted a voice on that council, and we had not been able to achieve that. And that's how that got to where we are today in bringing this case to the city of Palmdale. The same thing will happen with the city of Lancaster. The only difference with the city of Lancaster, and you guys may say, well, Rex Barrett is part of this, the only difference between Palmdale and Lancaster is when we went to the city of Palmdale and said we would like to talk about that, they went like this. Went to the city of Lancaster, they said, let's talk about it. Now, whether it was political or just smart, he said, let's talk about it. That's why we're on a different road with the city of Palmdale. Our school districts, same thing. You go as a community leader, someone who is vested in the community, and you ask the question. And if you have some interaction, we can have communication and we can together move forward. But if you turn your back, you have no other resolve in America but to move to the legal system. Because the legal system makes you address the question. So you can choose to fight it, or you can choose to have a conversation, because as the young man said earlier, right here, great candidate I'm hearing, he's tugging on my ear, he said some good things. And it's not a Republican Democrat thing with me, it's a people thing.
Right.
It's really a people thing. So if I come to Sulphur Springs and ask you that question, that some people are going to ask you that hard question, like when you meet somebody in the grocery store, that you can walk up to and have a conversation and ask that hard question. When I ask you that hard question and you turn your back on me, then I'm going to move to the process in America that brings you back to the table to have that conversation with me. And that's what we did in the Antelope Valley.
I want to add one sentence. The first time that I talked to Kevin, I asked him if he would like me to help with raising money to pay for his costs, and he turned me down.
I wanted to say, when you talk about forming fair districts, fairly drawn districts, you're talking about bringing things down to the local level, to the people who know what it is their communities need. When you don't have that, when you don't have these districts, you build slums. You build places where they don't have decent sidewalks and roads, where water is contaminated, they don't have parks. Your city is not a place to be proud of. The local people in the communities know what they need, and they need libraries and all the other things that take place in the other parts of the city. You build a great city when it's wonderful for all, and it can only be wonderful for all when those communities have a voice and a vote, a democratic vote.
I just want to add that, it seems to me, and I believe that this issue is a law. You look at the population on Solitaire Canyon and Sierra Highway, it's like me driving without a license. I have to drive with a license. It's the law. And that's the issue that we're discussing here today.
But say, I'm curious, with the city of Palmdale ignoring the judge, how do they do that? Did the judge give them an order, or what? How are they able to ignore them without any consequences?
Well, we're going to bring the consequences to them. But the judicial system doesn't act that quickly, but it does act.
So the judge didn't say, you do districts right now. The judge just kind of rendered an opinion.
The judge said that Palmdale's system of at-large elections violates the California Voting Rights Act. The judge said that he's going to look at what remedy to choose. He wants to, my guess is he wants to give Palmdale yet another opportunity to say, here's what we want to do to remedy the problem that we say doesn't exist. And he's being very cautious, and I can appreciate that. And we'll see what happens. Palmdale, however, is not being so cautious.
Did he order them to come back with anything?
Yes, there's going to be a hearing regarding the selection of
Someone
remedies.
said it's not how it works. I was just curious how it does work.
Well,
And maybe it doesn't even matter here. I just wondered.
Yeah,
No, maybe my question, I don't know if it interests other people.
well, let me just try to answer it quickly, because it's a legitimate question. We will have a hearing, perhaps September 30th, perhaps on another date, regarding the selection of an appropriate remedy. And that remedy could be districts, it could be something else. It could be cumulative voting, limited voting, change of election date, any combination thereof. However, in Palmdale in particular, we will seek 5 districts. And that would mean that all 5 of their council members should be districted. Now, one of their council members is Mayor Jim Ledford. He's a council member too, and under precedent under the Federal Voting Rights Act, he ought to be districted too.